one of the things we tried to do this with Vamper, and how do you educate young musicians and creators without it feeling like they're back at school doing homework? The problem with education tools is you can have the best tools and the best advice in the world. When folks don't know that they need to know it, they won't seek it out. It's a challenge. Part of that is the types of people that music attracts as well. Misfits and rebels don't necessarily want to go back to school. But at the end of the day, music is a business, and everyone would be wise to understand how that business works.
My guest today is Josh Simons, CEO of Australia's only ASX-listed music company, Vinyl Group. Josh's journey in music is as diverse as it gets. He founded Vamper, the LinkedIn for creatives, connecting over 1.4 million music professionals worldwide. He's also been instrumental in developing platforms like Jaxsta and Vinyl.com, tackling challenges in music metadata and e-commerce. Prior to working in tech, Josh ran a record label, publishing function, film production company, and was the lead singer of Australian indie rock band Buchanan. As a songwriter and producer, he shared credits with Travis Scott, Troye Sivan, Kanye West. As a performer, has toured with Coldplay, Keith Urban, and Carrie Underwood. During the interview, we spoke about innovations in music consumption, future of music labels, the intersection of physical and digital media, the resurgence of cassettes, and much more. I spoke to Josh via Zoom from his office in Melbourne, Australia. So it's been 3 years since we last talked, and a lot has changed for you. So let's go over that. You've expanded your horizons quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where I was at 3 years ago, probably on the verge of selling Vamper. What would follow has been this crazy roller coaster of pulling together lots of companies that help musicians and creators and also fans connect with their favorite musicians and art. And so we can get into all of that. But yeah, it is funny what a difference 3 years makes. I think when I last spoke to you, I possibly was in America as well. So there's been a lot of changes moving back to Australia and running a public company here. It's all very different.
Where are you at in Australia?
I'm down in Melbourne.
Ah, yeah, of course.
Sort of the music capital of the country, yeah.
Yeah, seems to be. Okay, so now basically Vinyl Media consists of a number of different companies.
Yes, there's Vinyl Group, which is the parent company. That's what ultimately bought Vamper and brought together Jaxsta and Vinyl.com, which is an e-commerce store. And last year we bought a thing called Serenade, which is like digital collectibles. And that's a sort of a parent company, and it owns a lot of the tech things that we do. And then off to the side there is Vinyl Media, which is basically a publishing house that I started assembling about 18 months ago by buying lots of other little publishers, bringing them together. They all have sort of in common that they speak to youth culture and specifically music, but we are getting beyond that now. We're sort of dabbling in film and TV and sport and lifestyle and things like that. That sort of exists in Australia as the largest youth publishing company. Our reach there extends to about 10, 11 million Australians every month. So it's a really powerful way of reaching fans and consumers. And it's also a really, from a group standpoint, effective way of bringing profit into the company to help fund the other things that might be currently loss leading, to allow them to grow and scale so that as a whole we can be sort of sustainable, while at the same time accessing fans and people that we might otherwise have paid for on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and wherever else you might advertise to sort of get access to these people. So it's part of a multi-year strategy to grow quite rapidly, and ultimately bring value back to our shareholders.
Did this happen organically?
Sure. Someone had to drive it. I mean, yeah. I think on paper it could probably look quite surgical and quite calculated, to which I'd say, well, it was calculated. It was, it cost a lot of money. We spent $20 million on media assets last year. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because, I approached investors with a plan and said, I think I can transform this business if we do X, Y, Z. And we did that. I think what people are waiting to see now is, and they'll see it, when we put out our annual report in, a few months' time, and then what happens in the subsequent quarters. They're waiting to see if did the plan work. Did it actually create a profitable company that, as a whole, has the capacity to keep growing in its own right. And I think I'm quietly confident that the answer will be yes. We've said to the market that come December quarter, ends December quarter, we should be able to wash our own face, which is the sort of the lingo here in Australia, at least. I don't know if that's used over in America. I'm sure it is. Yeah. But that's the goal, and I'm working really hard to get there.
So I'm curious. You dabble in vinyl.
Yeah.
That being said, over here, the vinyl has suffered from long wait times until quite a number of new pressing facilities came online. And then there were vendor problems. I'm wondering if you faced the same type of thing over there.
With our current business model, the way it stands at the moment, we're an e-commerce sort of drop shipping model / store. So we're really dealing directly with the warehouses that are already housing the stock, and we're just representing that and on selling it. So we're not really affected by that so much. However, probably won't shock you to know that as we sort of look into the space more and attempt to touch more parts of that sort of whole supply chain, we have definitely done a deep dive on some of those issues that are plaguing that world, the vinyl world, and are aware of some of the new players in the space that are hoping to come in and solve some of those problems. And all I'll say is that we're looking keenly, and I think hopefully we'll have something to add positively, in the years to come.
One of the things I noticed is you're big on collections, which I don't remember seeing anywhere else, really, and that was kind of a big focus.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's funnily enough that came from when we first launched the store. Obviously, when you first launch any like tech product, you want it to have all the features, and you want people to be able to go in and say, "I have this, and here's my collections." But you're kind of constrained by resources and also pressure to get to market. So when we launched, we said, well, we really want to have collections because it's such an important part of the vinyl experience is people showcasing their collection. But we hadn't yet. We do now. At that point, we couldn't have personalized, or we didn't have personalization. So we had to build staff collections, and they became really popular, and people started buying from the collections and browsing the collections. So what started as kind of a stopgap measure until we had something better has really been quite sticky. And so we haven't gotten rid of it. We've like leaned into it and gone deeper.
That makes sense. I mean, people do like that, and it makes it different. It makes something different than just buying one-offs.
Totally.
Yeah,
and the next stage is like, as I say, and we've started to do this now, but allowing people to show off their own collections, and then sharing those links, and really like being able to have your own vinyl page and use it as a bit of an identity. Obviously, it's great for the consumer, and like I say, it sort of helps their online presence and branding. But from our standpoint, we're hoping it really helps, drive sales and bring people to the site. So we'll see how that goes.
Where do you come down on AI when in the music business? And since I know that you were an artist, still are an artist, maybe you have two minds on this because it works.
I do.
On one. Yeah.
I just came out of literally just before this chat and a meeting with a blockchain music tech startup, and the founder was similarly conflicted on AI, and I think we all are. My view, and I think James Cameron might have said it, he was speaking on behalf of film, but I think it applies equally to music, is that as an auteur, as creators, we are the sum of everything we've ever consumed, and with our own maybe unique twist or spin on it. So I can listen to Jeff Buckley, Led Zeppelin, Eminem, all these things I listened to growing up. And then when I go to create music, there's probably a little sprinkle of all of it. And I'm not paying any of them a royalty, even though they indirectly influence my new art. I would say, and maybe this puts me out there as one of the bad guys, I think there's a delicate balance to get between, obviously, if certain works have been used to train the models, paying maybe the recording owner some royalty or something for those sounds that might be somewhat repurposed. But if I go to make a short film and I tell my friends it's in the style of Quentin Tarantino, I don't owe Quentin Tarantino any money. But if I go to an AI prompter and say, give me a 5-second video clip in the style of Quentin Tarantino, if you were to believe the debates right now, we should be paying Quentin Tarantino for that 5 seconds. And I don't know where that money is coming from. That's the first challenge. And then the second challenge is, if that made logical sense, wouldn't that mean every auteur ever has to go back and do an audit on all of their musical influences or, film influences and then backtrack and pay them? So I think that there's a point where it probably gets a little out of hand. The good news, I think, is that the debate's already happening. I think there's some antagonists in Washington that are probably going to fast track the results of that debate. And that's a good thing. That is a good thing. When things are brought to a head and there's passionate arguments on either side, I do think the industry and artists will win ultimately, but we'll see. We'll wait and see. We've got a way to go.
Now, again, if you look at it from the creative side and you look at it from, that's just a tool.
Well, that's right. Yeah, I didn't even get into that. And I totally subscribe to that. This is just like the sampling discussion all over again from 20, 30 years ago. And I mean, my first recording setup was just a beat up Windows 95 computer with like sound recorder or wave recorder, whatever it was, and me not using patch cables, but using headphone cables to wire devices next to each other and sample things. And I didn't even know it was sampling. It was just like, I'm going to record that noise there and stitch it over there and then mux it all on top of each other because there was no DAW back then that I could afford. And that is the spirit of music creation to me, is just, it's kind of that cowboy, just take what sounds you can and throw them into a blender and come up with something new. And that kind of AI embodies that a little bit. So yeah, look, I think as a creator, it's exciting. As a rights holder, there's obviously some work to be done.
Well, again, look at it like this too. If there's a skilled or even semi-skilled musician that's using it as a tool, that's one thing. If you have a consumer that's cranking out a lot of songs, which we seem to have happen, and all of a sudden you have 10 million AI generated songs on whatever platform you want, that's a different story. Same thing with film.
Yeah. Problem there also, because we've got this sort of shared pie business model with the streamers. If there is a kid putting out 10 million songs, and there are, I think something like 20,000 songs a day going out that are AI created, something like that. Don't quote me on the exact number. If that's to be believed, and I'm sure it is, that's a problem, because that is detracting from maybe some, folks that put in, cash to record original music. Now, though, we're getting into this sort of weird, fuzzy argument with which music has more merit, the music that costs money to produce and years of, honing the skill, or the music that was created on an AI platform that took 5 minutes. And I don't want to discriminate against either, the legitimacy of either product, but it's highlighting broader problems in how musicians get compensated. And again, I think net, this is great that we're having this conversation. And, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. The relationship between music and technology is a fascinating, codependent relationship that goes back as long as, music has existed, really, in that technology is how we reproduce music. This is just another twist and turn in that wonderful relationship that we all ultimately benefit from.
Yeah, the funny thing is, if you go back and follow it, music has always been on the forefront of any new technology, especially delivery technology that's happened. Yeah. And you can go back to wax cylinders, for instance. I wonder if there's a new delivery technology out there that might change the game.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I haven't heard anything. Have you?
No, I mean, there was this thing called the stem device, I think a few years ago, that allowed people to mix stems in real time. I think Kanye West was affiliated with it, which is, we're not allowed to talk about him anymore.
Right.
But I think that was an attempt at, a new iPod type thing. But no, I haven't seen anything that's like jumping out, like streaming, a new sort of fundamental, consumer experience hasn't really come along since streaming.
See, the whole thing about remixing a song yourself, getting the stems to do it, I don't think the average person is interested in that or even good at it.
Yeah, I agree. There is something, I remember just as a young kid, before I got into production and creating music myself, the idea of hearing instrumental versions of songs was always fascinating to me, but that could have just been, there was an underlying musician in me that wanted to understand that. But I think you might be right. I don't know that the average person actually cares about being able to do anything like that. So then the question comes back to is, how am I consuming my music? And right now, people just want an internet-connected device that can stream on demand. And it exists. It exists already. So I don't know.
And I think now price is becoming an issue where it really wasn't until now that prices are beginning to go up.
Yes.
And I think what we're going to find is people that had 2 and 3 subscriptions are now going to pare it down to 1.
Yeah.
So that is going to change the game somewhat. It's starting to happen already, really.
Prices going up is not the worst thing if it's flowing through back to musicians. The big key word there is if. So I think we'll wait and see there as well.
Well, I don't know if you want to get into this or not, but there's a whole thing with the execs and investors of Spotify that have sold off $1.5 billion worth of stock over the last couple of years. And you think, well, wait a second, that's a whole lot of money that a few people are making, and musicians in general are not even, sniffing that. So that's going to cause a backlash eventually, I think.
When executives sell stock, it can mean a number of things. At its most cynical, it can mean that the insiders have lost faith in the company's ability to continue to grow. One might see those sort of reports and go, to the people who run Spotify, think that we're at the peak of streaming, that there's something else coming. It's interesting to consider. Obviously, we don't really know. We can speculate for days on end, but we don't know.
Yeah. Tell me about Serenade.
Serenade is a platform created by a guy called Max Shand. We'd been watching it for a number of years. It pivoted several times over the years, but what struck us was this sort of mission to connect physical and digital worlds in again, music consumption. So it is, we talked about new ways of consuming music. I suppose this is one in a way. And I was fascinated by the sort of hunt by lots of music tech companies to unlock something that sits at that intersection of physical and digital. And I wasn't convinced that anything in my head was the right answer. So that means, you got to go and find something that might be. When we found out that, Max was looking to sell that business, he actually approached us, but it was a chat that we were ready to have because, as I said, we'd been following it for a number of years. And it's a great product. We make widgets, little cassette players or little mini vinyls or whatever you can imagine, a Barbie doll, anything that you want. And we put an NFC chip inside of it. When you tap it with a phone, it unlocks a digital experience like the streaming of a record or the download of a record. And most importantly, from the artist camps, which matters because it's a B2B product primarily, is that it counts towards an album sale. So we're chart accredited, and it's a real, depending on how management teams and labels sort of jump on it, it's a real game changer in terms of an album rollout campaign, particularly for major artists that have large fan bases that will buy, anything and everything. It's really exciting how some of them are applying that. Like I said, it's more of a B2B product because we're not selling directly to music consumers. We're selling to labels, managers on behalf of their artists, and their artists are then selling it to their fans. Yeah, it's one of our various music tech products that we sort of now manage and operate, but I love it. It's one of the more fun parts of the business.
Are the songs stored on the item?
No. They're stored in the cloud. You touch it, it unlocks this sort of experience on your phone, but that's all hosted in the cloud. Okay, that makes sense. But you need a Wi-Fi connection then. Yes.
So, and that's coming through your phone.
Yeah, it's coming through your phone.
Got it.
Yeah.
But the output then is from the item.
Well, so the item unlocks the phone is just accessing a link effectively that's contained inside the item and nowhere else. So the item has it points you to an IP address that isn't available otherwise.
It's a big dongle, basically.
Effectively, yeah.
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 Well, there you go, though. That's
the value for the fan is in the physical item, sort of sitting in the shelf or sitting with your records as something that like only a handful of other people have, and typically, we do these in limited runs, and they're not available, to buy online. They're usually available at the show or as part of a pre-order campaign, and then it's a one and done. So that they're kind of exclusive physical and exclusive digital items, which is what I found quite attractive.
So then they're individually branded then?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because what we're selling is really almost a white label product. And then I don't want to give away any names of people we're working with. So I'm trying to think of who's out. Oh, Jimmy Barnes. So Jimmy Barnes' team come to us and they say, we want to do, a mini cassette, and we want it to have his face on it or the album cover on it. And we want it to be in the color, the colors of the campaign. And here's the branding docs and blah, blah. it's quite easy for us to sort of spin all of that up and then turn that around in the style of the campaign.
So the cassette doesn't need a cassette player. It's just a cassette dongle,
No,
sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're meant to be sort of trinkets, widgets. I can never find the right word. I think my team hates it when I talk about it because I sound like an older dude.
Yeah.
That's what they are. I mean, they're kind of like, they're little collectible fun things, like little toys, and sometimes they're music related and sometimes they're not. But what they all have in common is they've got this sort of tap here to unlock, and it's very clear. That's our smart format. That's what we call it.
You mentioned cassettes. Is that something that's happening at all in Australia?
It's happening across the world. I think it's obviously a novelty. In the same way that something like 51% of people who are buying vinyl records don't even own a player, and they're just buying it for the collection and the physical sort of ownership. I think that's probably, I haven't seen the numbers, I'm sure that's even more the case with cassettes. So certainly you're not playing a cassette for its fidelity, that's for sure.
Well, that being said, when I was teaching at a college, I used to bring one of my classes, a mastering class, to a big, first of all, it was a big vinyl pressing house, and it did everything for major labels. And then the next thing you know, we went down there. One year it was all vinyl, and the next year it was all cassettes. And then a few years later, it was all CDs. That being said, in cassettes, I remember the foreman of the place saying, "Oh, come here, let's go into QC." And they pulled a cassette off the line and they put it in a player in QC, and it sounded amazing.
Yeah, okay.
And I said, "So what's the deal? How's this happening?" And they said, "Well, it's all in how the heads are aligned, and nobody ever aligns, a cassette player, or maybe they can't even do it, but, they had these high-end Marantz players."
Okay.
So it is possible.
I've got to go and get myself a new state-of-the-art tape player then, by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Do you have a collection?
I have 2 old ones in my garage.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I do have some old cassettes, because one of our investors actually has like a very large cassette collection, like tens of thousands, and he's given me a few. So I do have a small little collection.
Yeah.
On our website, we've started selling CDs and we're looking into cassettes. What we want vinyl.com to turn into is the ultimate destination to buy every type of collectible. So obviously we start with vinyl records, and that's the brand we're trying to build is around that. But what we want people to think of it in sort of 5-10 years time is that's the ultimate collector's site. And, maybe it goes beyond music too. So that's a longer term vision.
Is your market just Australia?
No. Our biggest market is North America.
Ah, okay.
Australia is probably our third largest market. We service the UK and parts of Europe, and then
Australia and New Zealand. So you are selling CDs or
yes, we're already selling CDs. Yeah, CDs launched either earlier this year or late last year. I can't quite remember, but we started with vinyl records, then we had merchandise, like select merchandise, and then we moved into CDs. And I think cassettes, like I said, we've been looking at. I'm not sure if there's a timeline on that.
There's a number of cassette-only labels here in the States.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. I don't know how successful they are, but they keep on doing it. So I guess they're successful enough to
there must be something
afloat.
there.
Yeah. But I'm always amazed. Except
are they breaking new acts, or are they?
It's primarily new acts. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's mostly underground acts for the most part.
That's the role of labels is coming, I think, full circle and is becoming relevant again. When I was sort of breaking as an artist some 10-15 years ago, I think the role of the label started to become a bit lost, because when I first came out of my music, digital aggregators had just launched, like TuneCore had just come out, and CD Baby was sort of just moving into digital stuff, and labels had no money because we were coming straight out of the Napster era, and streamers had only just launched too. So we had labels, really, if you think about what they exist to do, it's to get your music out there and to, through marketing, but also have it physically available in stores to consume, digital stores or physical. And if they don't have the money to market it and I can get it into the stores myself with a digital aggregator, you have to logically ask yourself, well, what's the point of a label then? And I do think there was a bit of soul searching that went on for a solid, period of time. And then I think more recently, like you said, there's some really interesting use cases for labels now. Like if it's a tape only label, that's interesting. It's they can actually create an identity for themselves as a label again, and then give value back to the artist as opposed to just taking from the artist. And I think it sounds like a small mindset shift, but it's really not. I think it's a fundamental value exchange proposition that was missing for some time. If labels are giving value to artists in the same way that artists are giving artists when they break are giving value to labels, then the whole proposition of a label becomes tenable again from an artist perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, as an artist, what it's like when you're creating, that's all you want to do. And you don't want to think about business. And as a matter of fact, you talk about a brand to most artists and their eyes glaze over. But that's one of the things that a label used to provide and can provide again is, okay, we're going to take this. So, just do what you do. Just keep on making music, and we'll take this and we'll tell you when we need you to be involved.
100%.
It's funny. I had the owner of a music PR company on, and we were talking about how much things have changed in music PR, which affects the label because it's basically music marketing.
Sure.
And one of the things was, remember, it was, okay, you're going to do your album release. And that was the big deal. And maybe you wouldn't do it for another couple of years. And then it was, well, we should do it every year. And then the whole philosophy changed. Okay, now you really have to release a song every month or 6 weeks or whatever it was. And that was the philosophy for a few years. And she was saying about how that's changed now, where everybody has burned out on it, from fans to artists. And there's just a big burnout factor. And that's completely changed. So it's funny how what you really don't know.
No, you don't know. I always joke that, so there was, when I came out with my first album and we ended up doing it independently, we were on a label and then the label went bust and we got an override and got our rights back, and I had to assemble a team, and I basically went back to everyone I'd ever worked with and said, can I hire you independently? And massive learning curve, but I put together an A team in Australia of folks who knew how to get records into stores and knew how to get them on the radio. And so for my first album, that was great, and it worked, and we sold some records and we got on the radio, and life was good. Fast forward 3 years, just 3 years, and we're rolling out the second record, and it's the same team, and it was a flop. And it certainly, it wasn't because the music was shit or anything like that. We had the wrong team. Suddenly, stores didn't matter. In fact, getting an editorial playlist for streaming mattered, and getting on the radio mattered way less. Like when that first record, if you got added to a certain radio station in Australia called Triple J, and then they put you on their Spotify playlist as well, you could guarantee millions of streams, tens of thousands of dollars in money. Like I said, fast forward 3 years, that same playlist would get you hundreds of thousands, and they were paying out less money because there's more people to divide the royalties with, because people were, the number of tracks was growing exponentially, and getting on radio didn't matter as much. And so the money that you put from your campaign into radio promotion, where you might otherwise have put it into online playlist promotion or something else, it just didn't matter. And so we ended up spending the same amount of money, getting far worse results. And it wasn't because anyone was, like I say, less talented or anything. It's just the team and the requirements for your team changed as the market trends changed. And the lesson in that is it's, as an artist, like you said, you want to be just focused on your music, but you've actually got to be like really attentive to what's going on in the industry and putting your money into the right things.
Okay, but you understand that because you were an artist and you got this firsthand. So how does that affect you today as an entrepreneur?
Well, market trends, which is what we're really talking about, and market forces, and that applies in everything in life. So I think you get older and you just become a little bit more aware of that and a little bit more open to those sorts of phenomena. And like you say, like as an artist, that's really the last thing you're thinking about. If you're in your head, you're like, have I got the people? Great. That's a big tick. And then you want to kind of be somewhat ignorant to it on purpose so that you can just focus on the thing you love doing. That obviously isn't a very good business acumen. And so I don't operate like that anymore. One of the things we tried to do this with Vamper, and I don't know that we were successful yet, but we'll continue to work on this, is how do you educate young fledgling, as I call them, musicians and creators, so that they can be broadly aware of some of this stuff nice and early on without it feeling like they're back at school doing homework. That to me would be a real legacy if we could solve that. We've done things to address that. We launched an academy for a while there, and we've now made that available for free on YouTube as a great resource for early stage musicians. But the problem with education tools is you can have the best tools and the best advice in the world. When folks don't know that they need to know it, they won't seek it out, and let alone, you can put it in front of their face and they still won't necessarily consume it because, naivety is, an arrogance, but not a malicious arrogance, a sort of malignant, maybe. So yeah, it's a challenge, and it's part of that is the types of people that music attracts as well. It's sort of the misfits and the rebels, and misfits and rebels don't necessarily want to go back to school. So there's a very awkward relationship there. But at the end of the day, music is a business, and everyone would be wise to understand how that business works.
That being said, that leads me to my last question for you, Josh. What's one thing that people don't know about what you do or misunderstand about you or what you do or your companies that you wish they would get?
Oh God, where do I start? I don't know. I assume most people don't know what I do on a day-to-day basis, and probably just see the brands that we own and wonder what the hell, the guy does at the top. Because, I mean, to be fair, yeah, I'm the CEO of Rolling Stone Australia, but also of a music database called Jackster, and they have nothing to do with each other. And so I think it would be reasonable for folks to go, "What? How does that work on a very practical level?" But business, like being in a band or like, running a musical operation, is just people coordination. And it's, having the right people and the right sets of policies, working on the right products, and ultimately trying to make a positive difference to the world, and hopefully make some money along the way as well. And that's what we do when we start a band. It's what we do when we start a business. And the more I go through life, the more I just see those patterns everywhere. It's the 3 Ps. It was a lesson I got told very early on in my startup journey, and it stuck with me. But people, product, and process. Without any of those 3 things, you don't really have a business. And I obsess over them. Anytime I'm faced with a challenge, it's you got to view the challenge through at least one of those lenses. How does this affect people? How does this affect product? How does this affect process? How does this improve people, product, process? And if it's not sort of addressing one or more of those things, it's time to look at things through a slightly different lens. So yeah, that's my job. My job is people management predominantly.
So the 3 Ps for vocal production, do you know these? Pitch, passion, pocket.
There you go.
Yeah. So whenever someone says the 3 Ps, that's immediately where my head goes. But
I love it. So I guess I'm going to have to walk around preaching about the 6 Ps now.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks so much,
Great.
Josh. This is great.
Thanks for having me back on. Yeah.
Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news, and find out about openings for my latest online classes at bobbyowsinski.com. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.